Welcome back to the channel. I'm really excited about this video and the series of videos that I'm going to be producing here on transforming negative internal dialogue. And I think the reason that I'm most excited about this is because there's not a lot of good information on what to do with negative internal dialogue, right? People typically will either try and just program over their negative internal dialogue, or they will try to fight with it. So if their negative internal dialogue is saying something critical, Tamara, you can come through. You're fine. That's just a Tamara. So if their negative internal dialogue is saying something like, you know, you're such a piece of whatever, what they'll try and do is they'll try and block it out, or they'll try and argue with it. They'll say things like, no, I'm actually an incredible human being, right? And these approaches are often ineffective. And I'm going to be going deeper into why the traditional approaches to transforming negative internal dialogue historically don't work, and give you some really fast and effective tools in this video and in the second video. So this video, if you've managed to watch it this long, I know that in YouTube land, people typically don't have an attention span. But in case you're one of those few people who's able to concentrate long enough to learn probably one of the most powerful mindset techniques on the planet, then I congratulate you and I honor you for having an attention span larger than that of a goldfish. I think in this day and age that deserves to be congratulated. There's going to be two parts to this video series. One, becoming aware of and transforming the qualities of an internal voice. And we'll talk about why that's going to be more effective than actually changing the content in the first place. And then two, in the second part, we're going to be going into an approach, a philosophy, an attitude of working with negative internal dialogue, that you can actually take that attitude and bring it with you into most types of coaching, therapeutic situations. And this approach, this attitude, this philosophy of change that you need to have in order to work well with negative internal dialogue is actually quite transformative across disciplines. So I really recommend watching the second video as well, because when you do, you're going to learn things about how to work with yourself in such a way that you get the most from yourself. Okay? So in this video, part one, we're going to be looking at the qualities of internal dialogue. And when I say qualities, I want you to remember, when we're talking about internal dialogue, we're talking about hallucinated sound. Internal dialogue is imagined or hallucinated sound. And that is a important function of the nervous system. In order for you to remember what somebody told you, you have to hallucinate their voice and hear it again, right? In order for you to sometimes in order to run particular strategies in the mind, right? Some people motivate themselves by talking to themselves. They're hearing a voice on the inside that's not actually real. Okay, so we're creating imaginary sound. But even if it's imaginary sound, it still has to have the properties of sound itself. So any internal dialogue will have the properties of sound. And that's what we want to go into today, is what are the properties of this sound that when we start to adjust this, it's going to make a tremendous difference in how you feel. And ultimately, how you feel affects what you do, it affects what you perceive to be real, and it affects your results and actions in the real world. So qualities of sound. In NLP, this is referred to submodalities, right? But submodality is just another word for qualities of either a sound, or in most cases in NLP, where NLP is very visually biased, right? So qualities of sound or images. In this case, we're looking at qualities of a sound. So one thing that all sound has is a location. As you're listening to me now, the sound is being projected from a place at you or away from you, right? If you were on the street and a fire engine was coming towards you, you would hear the sound of the fire engine coming towards you and then moving off into the distance. All sound has a location, including the ones that you imagine. Your internal dialogue will speak to you from a particular location. It might be on the right, it might be on the left, it might be behind you, it might be in front of you. And in NLP, probably the most powerful quality to play with, the most powerful submodality to play with, will always be location. For 80, and I'm making this statistic up, but for most people, changing the location typically will be the most powerful driver of how we feel about something. So as you're watching this video, I would really invite you to stop and take a mental inventory. That is, again, assuming you're still with us. And if you are, realize and actually congratulate yourself, because you're one of the few who's actually managed to make it this far. But assuming that you're still with us, stop, pay attention, focus back in. Give this video your full attention. And I want you to make an inventory. Think of a time when you have negative internal dialogue. And when you do, I'm not so interested in what it's saying to you right now. I'm more interested in where do you hear the voice. Is it on the right? Is it on the left? Is it behind you? Is it in front of you? Let's make a list of the qualities of that voice, okay? Starting with location, where is it? Sound also has volume. A sound can be loud, it can be soft, and these things affect how we feel. If you've ever been around somebody who talks very quietly, and then you put them around somebody who's very loud, there's an obvious mismatch. They lose rapport with each other. Right? People who are loud talking, it's because their internal world is a certain way. And so if you want to have rapport with one of those people, you're going to have to amp it up. And by the same token, if you want to have rapport with somebody who's on a different plane, you're going to have to bring your tone down. When you hear a whisper, it affects you differently than when somebody screams. What is the volume of that internal voice? How loud or soft is it? What is the tone? Is it nagging? Is it scared? I remember I've worked with people with negative internal dialogue who their fearful voice is literally, the tone of its emotional tone is it's filled with dread. What is the emotional tone of that internal voice? Okay. How rich is the sound? Start to go through and notice the qualities. Now, I will put inside this, in the comments or in one of the descriptions, I'll put a link to a complete list of auditory submodalities so that you can really go through and start to become aware of how you've been thinking. Not what, but how. Because the what isn't as powerful as changing the how. And this is, to drive this point home for you, if you stop and you think about, I can say the same words to you, but the tone of my voice communicates an entirely different meaning, right? If I say like and subscribe to this video, or if I say like and subscribe, or I say like and subscribe, it feels different to you. By the same token, if somebody tells you you're such a jerk, it's different than you're such a jerk, right? It's different based on how based on the tone of voice. It literally changes the meaning. And in the second video, we're going to talk about positive intention. Positive intention is one of the presuppositions in coaching and NLP that every thought, feeling, behavior, belief that you've developed over time was formed for a positive intention. Doesn't mean it's positive in your life, but that critical internal dialogue actually was formed for a positive reason. And so it wants you to have information. So if we look at the athlete, for example, who doesn't want to choke, and they have a voice that's saying, don't choke. Well, it's giving them a negative command, but it's there to serve them. What we can do is we can change the qualities of the voice so that it doesn't make us feel bad, it doesn't interrupt us, doesn't interrupt our flow, but we still get the same information. Okay? So start to experiment with those qualities. Start changing the location and really give yourself permission to be a little bit of a mad scientist here. Anything that isn't more useful for you, you can always change back, or it'll go back naturally anyway if it's not more useful. So change the location. If the voice is on the right, what happens when you pull it out in front of you and it criticizes you from here? What happens when you hear it coming from below you, above you, behind you? What happens if you have it all the way off in the distance? How does that change it? Experiment with turning the volume of the voice up, turn it down. Change the emotional tone. If it's critical, make it a sexy, seductive voice. Make it a happy voice. Notice what happens as you start to change the tonality. How does that change the meaning? And as you start to go through these things one by one, you will find a change that both allows you to get the information and does not interfere with either how you feel or what it is that you need to get done in the moment. And these will be profound changes. Anxious people, for example, typically will have a very rapid negative internal dialogue going on. And if you can simply get them to criticize themselves in a smooth, slow tonality, they can't be anxious anymore. All right? So I want you to make an inventory of those qualities. Comment in the section below. Your negative internal dialogue, I don't want to know what it says to you. It's not relevant at this moment in time. I want to know, what is the location of the voice? What is the volume? What is the emotional tone? And what changes did you make in the quality of the sound to create a difference in how you feel about that internal voice? Now, couple of recommendations, because these are favorites in the NLP community. Use a silly voice. Imagine Mickey Mouse criticizing you, or Borat, or something like that. And you'll notice immediately that you feel differently when doing that. Okay? Watch the next video, in which I'm going to talk about the philosophy of how to work with negative internal dialogue. We'll go more into things like positive intention. We'll learn more about additional resources that negative internal dialogue, you may not have realized, actually has resources for you. There may be information that you can give that part of yourself that will be much more powerful, much more transformative for you in the future. As always, like, comment, subscribe to get more life-changing information like this.